Welcome once again to the What Makes You Tick podcast. This is episode 14, and my guest today is entrepreneur Elaine Sullivan. Folks, I'm really excited to share this podcast with you. June is the month of awareness for scoliosis, and my guest today is Elaine Sullivan, who is an entrepreneur and who is running a very, very successful salon called Avery Lane. Now, Elaine set up this business when she was in her early 20s. However, from the age of 12, Elaine was diagnosed with scoliosis and has had to manage that ever since. And what I wanted to talk to Elaine about was, in fact, how she did manage it and how she also managed to set up a business, to be an entrepreneur, to manage people, and then also to figure out how she could get her own life back on track. Elaine shares some really interesting insights into how she got through scoliosis and how she managed through incredibly dark times. Elaine has an amazing can-do attitude, and this stems from the foundation that was set by her parents when she was young. And for me, this story is one that we can all learn from. Elaine, thank you so much for sharing your story. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Elaine Sullivan. Elaine Sullivan, thank you so much for joining What Makes You Tick and being my next guest on this podcast. You're laughing at me, that's okay. Great to have you on board. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. I can't feel anything other than listening to your previous guests that this is going to be a little bit of a letdown.
Oh, not at all, not at all. Listen, I'm just delighted that you said yes to coming on because June is the month for raising awareness for scoliosis, and it's something that I've been teeing up with you for a while. That I'd love to have you on and talk to you about a journey that you've faced throughout your life in managing and dealing with scoliosis. And one of the reasons why I was kind of interested in you telling your journey is because I do these challenges with my PT side of things, with Brad's PT. One of the challenges I put in place, you took part in, and I thought you did brilliantly. It was the bench press challenge. But what I thought was really interesting about it was afterwards, I didn't know your situation or your relationship with scoliosis at the time, and when I found out, I was absolutely in awe. I was going, holy Jesus. And you shared some extras and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I need to find out more. I need to learn. I need to understand. But I just want to understand more, and I'd love you to share your journey, if you wouldn't mind, about how that came about and how you've lived with it.
And it started fairly early on. Like I was 12 when I first got diagnosed with scoliosis, and back in, so it would have been like 97, about 97. And they used to come into your school and use a ruler to measure it, and they discovered that, like, so it's basically like whoever had a slight curve, and it happens to girls and boys when they're coming up to puberty, when you take like your growth spurt and the bones are soft and stuff like that. So you can kind of have adolescent scoliosis, and you can have kind of juvenile scoliosis that people are born with, and it can be kind of on its own, or it can be mixed with the likes of like spina bifida and things like that. So the one that I had two curves. So I had like lumbar curve, and then it kind of went up into my thoracic. So it wasn't overly noticeable because kind of like one curve sort of offset the other curve. And I would have been a fairly active kid, and like always kind of drama school and dancing and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so anyway, we found out that it was, and went into Temple Street, and I saw surgeon Frank McManus, and he kind of basically saw you once and kind of went, right. There wasn't really anything that they did other than monitor it. Like, so some people kind of, that's as much as it'll go. And then some people it kind of progresses. And kind of over the space of 3 months, my curves went from being like 20 degrees, 30 degrees, to being both roughly like 90 degrees, which is kind of basically like your torso going into a box shape. And especially because there's two curves. So as one sort of pushes down, and that's why you see some people that have kind of scoliosis and maybe haven't kind of had any surgery or anything like that. And older people, like from previous generations, they go quite boxy and their torso gets very kind of rotund, and it nearly looks like a rectangle. So so it happened pretty quickly, and to be honest with you, it happened to the point that like I didn't realize what was going on, and I still have a very vivid memory of being like upstairs in the canteen in Temple Street with my mum and dad the night before going for downstairs. I was like, I don't want to do this. Do you know, there was no like, this is what's happening to you, you know, you have to go and, you know, do X, Y, and Z. There was no prehab, there was nothing.
What age were you? 12?
12, yeah. Well, no, I was 12 when I found out. I think I was 13 getting it done.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was like my dad was a fireman stroke, because they would have been firemen and paramedics at the time, like, and like, so it was, they knew you were kind of in good hands, but you would have you went in, it was from neck to your bum, you were getting rods shoved in, and then they took bone from your hip and they sprinkle it in between your vertebrae, and then that kind of fuses together. So the rods are kind of redundant after a while once the spine is actually fused as a solid structure. And Frank McManus left 2 vertebrae at the base of my spine that he didn't fuse, so that I'd kind of have some movement, that I wouldn't be as kind of rigid. And yeah, so he did that, and it was a proper like learn to walk again kind of scenario, like, you know. And I think it affected me probably a lot more looking back on it than I gave it credit for at the time, you know, like, because that's where you're kind of maybe, you know, you're an adolescent, you should really be kind of starting to assert your independence and, you know, do things for yourself, and you sort of went straight back into being the baby, you know, having people wash it and all that sort of stuff again, and just, yeah, like people just wrap you up in cotton wool and they're like, you know, oh, don't break. And I think it's changed a lot now. Like kids that have my type of scoliosis now, like a lot of them will have rods that actually grow with them, and they'll just go in and the rod will kind of grow along with the spine and they twist it. So it's like a bit of scaffolding that kind of supports the spine as it grows, where, excuse me, mine was full blown like chisel and hammer, and it was quite barbaric as opposed to like what they do today. But anyway, it about a year, 2 later, it sort of, everything was healed, and it was just business as usual, get on with it, you know. And I got on with it until I was 19, and I was a very good kid. I was a very good kid. But so good that my mom was like, get out, you need to go to the pub, do things with people. And I was like, okay. So I went out and I got pregnant, and so I had my Lily at 20, and I was also hairdressing, and so kind of being on your feet, and like, so when you've scoliosis and you're fused and you're pregnant, your pelvis can't like open, your spine can't soften, so you're all like, you carry your baby like out here. So like, in fairness, she was 9'4", she was pretty big, but she wasn't that big, like, you know, I could put my fingers out, my hands out, and I wouldn't be able to touch my belly button kind of thing. Like, it was colossal. But anyway, I had her, and soon after, back pain, and the spine, basically, I had broken rods, so they reckon I'd broken my rods while I was pregnant, and they were piercing some stuff. They were like heading towards lungs, and they were causing like infection. So it was constant infection because it's a foreign body. So you figure out what to do and what it was. And then I had a second surgeon who decided they needed to come out. And the problem is when the metal has been in for so long, it's fused with your spine. So he described what they had to do to take them out. And I do believe that you have someone straddling you and then someone behind them reefing the rods to try and get the thing out. And it's quite barbaric. So they took them out, all grand, all fine. I get into kind of strength and conditioning then after that a little bit. But the spine was very, very unstable. It was kind of like they broke the structure as when they took the rods out, and went on couple of years, couple of grand years, and then I opened the business in 2012, and kind of the level of work and the level of stress and everything else went up, and I started to kind of fall forward. Like I started to kind of not being able to hold myself up straight. So you'd stand straight at the start of the day, and as the day would go on, you'd fall forward. And a couple of months in, it was just getting worse and worse, and nerves were getting compressed, and my feet wouldn't lift off the ground, and you were kind of shuffling around. So I was like basically at 90 degrees, shuffling around. My head was roughly around people's elbows, and and I'm in an aesthetics industry, trying to be cool in the middle of town, cutting people's hair, and shuffling over to people selling the dream, So there was a lot of head tilting at that stage, and a lot of, okay. And yeah, my legs just stopped working. They just stopped moving. So I went back to the surgeon, and he was like, there's nothing really we can do. It's too iffy. Like you're fucked.
How did that feel when he was saying that to you?
Yeah, it was a bit hard to swallow. Like I would have been only 29 at that stage. Like I was, I just opened the shop a couple of years, and it was just, it wasn't enough. Like it was just a right, like you were getting written off. So I'd had multiple kind of injections, like steroid injections and stuff, and epidurals, and they just soften your bones over a longer period of time. Like, you can get them done every now and then, and it's grand if somebody has some aches and pains and, slip disc or something like that. But the amount that they have to put in, and the amount of times they have to do it, they only have a certain amount of times that they can do it. So it was just sort of kicking the can down the road. So it got to the point that I was like walking with a stick, and I had a walker, and you couldn't get from A to B. Like you just couldn't. I'd like get dropped to work. I'd stand all day doing hair because it was fine. You could kind of, prop yourself up a bit, and but like quality of life was diminishing rapidly, and yeah, just kind of hearing that, like, that's it now, you're done, and you're kind of going, no, that's not okay. That's not okay. So we decided to leave him, and a client of mine, I was doing her hair, and she was only after having a small spinal fusion on a couple of discs, and I was kind of making her feel comfy and making sure she was all right and stuff like that, and we just got talking, and I was like, yeah, scoliosis as well, and she was like, no way. She was being very polite. Quite obvious that I had scoliosis. And anyway, she was telling me about a friend of hers, Ashley Poynton, who was a very good spinal surgeon, and I was like, okay. And like at this stage, we'd kind of exhausted all kind of avenues, and really kind of just come to terms with the fact that this was going to be it, and I was going to have to adapt and all the rest of it. So anyway, I went to see him, and he kind of was like, right, yeah, okay, so yeah, you're fucked. And but he was like, listen, he told me the odds of because basically what had happened was the spine had come away from the pelvis, and because of the two vertebrae that were left unfused, and not just because of that, but the weight of a solid structure on top of just two vertebrae that are just basically rubbing for a decade or so. And because I'm a little bit of a bulldozer, and that's just how I'm made. I wouldn't be exactly dainty, and I wouldn't be like sitting around just drinking tea.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
Yeah.
So I pushed it, and I probably pushed it to its limits, and I just probably pushed it too far, to be honest. But he said, listen, these are the odds. I've done it a couple of times. A couple of them are walking. Some of them aren't. And I was kind of going, well, he's like, I don't know whether I can fix it. And I was like, well, I'm broken already, so we might as well try. So we did, and so he did like an extended pelvic fusion. So he redid my fusion, put the rods back in my spine, and then extended it down onto the pelvis, but it didn't hold. And I also got a thing called clonus at that stage, which was like a pathological nervous system thing, whereby you just continually shake like you have Parkinson's.
Okay.
So that was fun. So kind of just stopped a lot of the process of getting better because you kind of had to contend with the fact that you were vibrating while you were trying to use muscles that just weren't working. Okay, so 29 into Ashley Point, and he was like, "You're kind of broke. I'm not sure I can fix you." And I was like, "Right, well, I'm broke anyway, so you might as well try." And we tried. We got the fusion in. We got a pelvic fusion in as well, and unfortunately, it just didn't hold. And there was lots of other complications, like nervous system stuff. And we had to go again. And I had a brief car accident in the middle that kind of disrupted a lot of the structure. And so we had to go in again. And
you're okay?
Yeah, it was grand. But it just, everything was just about healing, and I'd only been driving about a week or two.
Okay.
And I got rear-ended, and I couldn't feel my legs as soon as it happened, and it was straight back in. And anyway, then just things had gone offline, and so anyway, things weren't healing, and he said that we had to do this kind of SI joint fusion on your pelvis because the pelvis was kind of crumbling. So basically they put like 6 rods going across and then 6 rods from front to back through the pelvis, and then that was going to anchor the metal coming from the spine. So I think it was like 5 or 6 procedures, but you had to kind of stay perfectly still so things would line up, and none of them, like the screws and stuff, wouldn't go into any of the bone, they wouldn't hold it, so it all had to be kind of joined together with kind of wire metal sort of thing. But one piece had to go in, and then you had to wait for that to set so that you could put the screw in and turn it into the thing. So yeah, that was over kind of like a sort of 2.5-3 year period with Ashley. And at that stage, the opioids had gone through the roof, and like when you're having surgeries and you're having opioids, the only way to go opioids is up. So what I was left with was a very severe opioid dependency, and like I'd gone through, as I said, I was in the matter for a very, very long time, and I'd gone through like rehab facilities and stuff, and they're just not equipped to deal with people like me when they don't necessarily know what's going on. Like, you know, I think you'd done 3 surgeries before me that was kind of similar, but you're also dealing with a lot more, like your nervous system just kind of at some point just goes, fuck off, leave me alone. You know, you're heavily sedated because they have to sedate you because they don't know if you're going to kind of get up and about again. And a lot of the stuff that they were giving you to stop the shaking and was all sort of epileptic drugs, so it slows the metabolism down to the point that it nearly stops. And and then you kind of get to the point that they send you on your merry way, and you're at home with a severe opioid dependency. So that was kind of, to be honest, the drug side of stuff was harder than the surgery stuff.
How did you get through that? How did you manage through that?
That was really, really dark. Like that was the bit that I couldn't get my head around, because you could go, they would just give you more. Like I can't explain, like when you're mangled, they'll give you anything you want. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not that you want it, but they're like, okay, we'll increase the dose in this, and the pain specialist comes around and all the rest of it. So, and then there was somebody mentioned like methadone, and I heard that word and I was like, no. So YouTube was amazing. Because I couldn't move, you start to live vicariously through other people, and you were watching stupid stuff, like people just doing normal things. And I've always been great, I suppose, for visualization. So you were able to kind of just get a bit lost in it. So I started looking on YouTube, and I came across, thankfully, Middle America is having a massive opioid pandemic. So there was lots on there. You know, there was lots of people that had started taking opioids for whatever, like health reason, and suddenly spiraled into heroin because it was cheaper than keeping up their opioid addiction or dependency. And there was like one YouTube video in particular. It was kind of, the channel was like returnfromhell.com, and your man was basically a recovered heroin addict. And when you've taken that many opioids, you stop producing dopamine. Your brain just doesn't need to, because you're getting your dopamine hit from the opioids. And like I grew up in Coolock, so like I never would have had very little empathy for junkies, because that's what you saw on the bus and dragging kids around. And my idea of them was very, very different to what the reality of it was. Like, you're numb, you feel nothing. It's nothingness. It's Middle Earth. And like I wanted to cut off my legs. Like when I started, like, I was feeling pain where there had never been pain before. And your brain has lots of different things, and you were learning basically from ex-drug addicts what they did to come off stuff. And I was like, things like my cycle had stopped. I had no menstrual cycle. I just looked like a dead person. And I'd also, like, I'd no muscle. I'd lay in bed for like 3 years solid and had no muscle mass whatsoever. And like, my sister used to joke with me that I looked like Jabba the Hutt, because I'd lie down and everything had just kind of like sprawled down on the bed, and you kind of became one with the mattress. So like, I came out of hospital like 107 kilograms, and like I come out like a couple of inches shorter as well. So, out of all of this, if you've got two curves, I should be like 5'10". So I'm like 5'10", scrunched into 5'5.5". And just looking at yourself going, how do we end up here? So thankfully, my surgeon isn't just my surgeon. He has a team of people. And I kind of just fired over an email going like, what the fuck am I meant to do? And his managing director had kind of been someone that I could relate to, because she'd had a stroke and kind of came back and turned herself into a badass. And, it was just somebody to relate to. So, and like, most surgeons don't have a huge personality, and she's kind of his personality. So you were able to kind of bounce back and forth. And I wasn't walking. Like, I was using my chair for everything. I was using my walker. I was still broken. I was still fucked. And like, I've a great group of people around me, like, and stupid stuff. Like, I'd finally gotten my Golf GTI, and yet I was trying to bundle my wheelchair into the back of it, and it wasn't really the picture I had in my head. And I remember sitting on Stephen's Green on the boot, trying to get the wheelchair into the boot. And people were asking me, could they help me? And I was just going, no, I'll get my own fucking wheelchair into my own fucking car, and I'm fine, But that was probably one of my lowest kind of turning moments, where I was like, no, I've got my GTI, and I'm going to look like I should be driving a GTI.
Yeah.
So there was lots of different reasons why, but there was just people around you and things that sparked, and kind of going, no, this is not it. This cannot be it. This is not it. So I started to sort of let people help, I suppose. I started looking for help. From on the internet, and I found things about your cycle, and where I was just figuring it out. And through figuring it out, cue Rocky montage now. Through Bette Midler and ruthless people in the basement. Like, I have some issues. Anyway,
I'm laughing. You're expecting me to know that movie. I haven't a clue what that.
Oh, okay. Right. Shit, I'm showing my age.
Oh, don't worry. You're not. I know Bette Midler.
Where were I? Yeah, so I kind of went, this is not it. Grand. Okay, so I started looking for help. Found out that looking at my cycle and looking at the times of the month and all that sort of stuff, I was trying to come off stuff. I was trying to lower doses, and I just couldn't. I couldn't withdraw. It was just horrendous. But sometimes I could, and I couldn't figure out why sometimes I could and sometimes I couldn't. And I started using Clue, because BuzzFeed did a thing on Clue. Again, I spent a lot of time on the internet, and a lot of time around teenagers on the internet who were very positive. But anyway, there was a thing called Clue, which was tracking your cycle, and over a period of time, I figured out and analysed it a little bit, and I was figuring out why sometimes I could and why sometimes I couldn't. And I figured out that if I did it at the start of the month, when the willpower was higher and you were able to do stuff, that's when I started to lower my doses. So every month I'd start to lower my dose.
Mm-hmm.
not on the guidance of. I didn't tell the doctors I was doing it, because they were all very kind of, oh no, you can't just stop X, Y, and Z. And there's not a whole lot there for people when that's happening. So you kind of nearly just have to do it yourself. You do just have to do it yourself. There isn't two ways about it. So the doses started to come down, and I started getting a little bit more lucid, but just feeling like still a little bit lost, more than a little bit lost. And then randomly, I was sitting outside Starbucks in Leeson Street, and I met a client that used to come to the salon, Joanna Butler, and she was like, oh, how are you? And I was like, yeah, great. And we started chatting away, and she was like, you should really go over there. And I was like, where? And she was like, FFS. And she was like, they'd love to get their hands on you. And I was like, yeah, don't know. And so I went home and I emailed the surgeon, and I was like, can I go to the gym? They were like, no, you can't go to the gym. I was like, but they have a physio, and they were like, okay, right, we'll see what we could do. And they were back and forth, and they were like, okay. And I went in and I met with Mike, and then like somebody talked to me. It was a really weird experience, just having someone that wasn't talking about like your surgery or talking about anything like that. It was just talking about other stuff with people that were roughly around my age, and it was just a bit like, oh, okay, this is new. Okay, maybe. And then I was emailing back and forth, and it like sharing what was going on with me, and they were all a little bit scared, and then they pointed me towards Cully. And so my physio, the surgeon's physio, Claire, started dealing with Eric back and forth and saying, you know, what I could do, what I couldn't do. And what I could do was very, very minimal. What they'd allow me to do was very minimal. So I just started going, and it was just having somewhere to go. I still had the shop at this stage, but like I was making more of a hames of it every time I went in there, because you just weren't able. I was just kind of hanging on in there by a thread, and going into FFS and kind of doing something. I suppose it was just odd, because suddenly these people didn't know you, but they didn't treat you like, you know, I was kind of going in. I still kind of had my stick, but I was able to put it in my bag and kind of use it when I needed it. And I still wasn't kind of fully walking properly. I was kind of more falling very well. So anywhere I go, I would have to go at pace, because, you know, you didn't have full control of the legs and stuff. So I still had clonus, so I was still very shaky, and he was still very scared. And I kind of gave him a heart attack a couple of times, just vibrating on the floor. And he just let it kind of, I was like, it's grand, it'll just write itself out, it'll stop in a minute.
I love it. Like panic. Oh, sugar, like an epileptic fit. Just let it go. It'll happen.
Yeah. Pretty much. That was pretty how you just kind of had to. So you could it would just start depending on what way. You can start it from your ankle or your hip, and depending on what way we move. So we just took it slowly, but he wasn't kind of deterred by the fact that you were standing there shaking in front of him. He was kind of more intrigued. So again, starting to figure out what muscles worked, and like my physio in hospitals like consisted of sit to stands, and like I remember being told I was going into the gym out in one particular rehab facility, and they were going to get me in there, and it'd be 20 minutes or two times in the gym every day. And of course I went out and bought gym gear, thinking that we were going down to like, you know, start. And I got wheeled in, and there was a whole row of old people doing head, shoulders, knees and toes.
Oh, you're joking. Wow.
I remember just like my spirit was just gone at that stage. So going in and seeing some dumbbells and seeing somebody of, you know, again, my age, and people just my age-ish, it just started to spark some stuff, and it gave me a little bit of something to look forward to, and it gave me a reason to brush my hair and put makeup on and have some conversation that wasn't about stuff. And, you know, we were waffling about, like, you know, sports people, and, you know, go and have surgeries all the time and have spinal stuff, and they come back. And we kind of sort of figured out that, like, they come back because they've got a team of people around them. They feel part of something. They feel connected to something. So, like, I'll get very gushy all of the time talking about FFS, because that was, like, yeah, I mean, I went in there and I was probably as vulnerable and as raw and as you can get. And, you know, they just dealt with you. They dealt with you holistically as a person. And, you know, there was no head tilting. There was no, and they were interested. So I started to work with Kieran with precision nutrition. And again, that was kind of forming habits. And for anybody recovering from any kind of addiction or dependency or anything like that, and from basically becoming institutionalized, forming habits is really, really important. And again, it was just something I didn't feel silly. I didn't feel like stupid. It was just learning to be a person again. And it was just having a team of people around you, like between the surgeon, Eric, Kieran, and even like any of them in FFS, like, you know, okay, it took me a good 18 months to be okay with fist pumps. But, you know, we got there. We did get there. And like I can't look Kieran Ruddock in the eye because he knows too much. Like I actually physically I can't have a conversation with him. I turned into an 11-year-old girl going like, but it remained consistent, and I think that's the thing. Like everything, it was people being consistent, and yeah. So it just made you feel part of something. It was that community. It was, and I think it's that for a lot of people. But yeah, it was kind of the start of a very different narrative, on my life where you kind of went, all right, okay, maybe just maybe.
So tell me though, since you started with FFS, what have you seen? What changes have you seen?
So we started in FFS. I was there about like 3 or 4 months before I started with PN, before I actually had to start kind of looking at the weight side of stuff or anything like that. And, you know, if you've got a dodgy spine, any kind of excess weight is not good. But mine was drug weight and all the other stuff. So as I said, I kind of 2 months in and I thought I was like, you know, deadly. And, you know, again, I've a very strong ability to visualize, and again, like body dysmorphia of going the other way. So I had to kind of, you know, realize and just be real, collect the data and move on. So we got on the scales, and Eric got on the scales, and he was like 83 kilos. And I jumped on the scales again because I've been working on this for months. So obviously, like, you know, I'd probably be roughly around the same as him when I got on. I was 97, and I was like, "Oh my God, swallow me up!" So yeah, and then through precision nutrition and stuff like that, I got down to 63 kilos, and you know, found out things like what bod pods are. Yeah, and like I think my last bod pod's now before COVID and all the rest of it. But I think I was like 15% body fat, and that's not like I've never ate as much as I have in the last couple of years. And I'm 2 full years doing PN, and I actually signed up for my 3rd during COVID because I was in need, and yeah, so it's just changed. It's changed my outlook on stuff. Like it's changed the why. It's made me figure out the why, and it's given me validation that my thought processes are right. And again, as I said, like, you know, if you can see it, you know, you can be it, and you're a product of your environment. And if you surround yourself with the right people, you generally, you know, your confidence builds, and you just, yeah. I don't know. I can't really put it into words. Like I'm not a big sharer. I'm not a big, you know. I think as well, like when you have something like scoliosis that lives with you forever, you're also very aware that you don't want that thing to define you, and you can very easily let it define you if you let it out. Like you know, people do a lot of talking. I prefer to listen to the doers, and I prefer to be one of the doers and talk to people along the way, but not in a proclamation kind of way. Like it's, you know, everybody's shit is real to themselves, and FFS just kind of pulled it all together. It pulled it out. It pulled everything that I needed at the time. You know, it was a fully rounded service. It was physical, which is very necessary. It brought nutrition into it. It brought sports psychology into it. It brought being part of a team. It brought all of the things that you need to treat a person. Where you're in hospital, they treat the thing. That's what they have to do because that's how hospitals work. The system works like that. But then they kind of leave you hanging.
So I have a question for you then, and just an add to that. So, we hadn't touched on it, but that's how we came to kind of become acquaintance with one another. It was through FFS and through that team that you're talking about. And I just would love to understand, what would you say to somebody now who is maybe beginning their journey on the scoliosis path, or maybe within it, and where you were at 24, 25, whatever. What kind of advice would you give them now?
You need to look after you. People would always tell you to look after yourself, and you're like, what is that? How do you look after yourself when you're in, if you're in chronic pain? And, I know they've done studies on chronic pain, and yes, things are sore, and yes, it can be painful, but a lot of the time it's the spirit that's damaged. And I'm not spiritual at all, but I do believe in the human spirit, and that can get beaten down to the point that it's almost non-existent, and unless you have those sparks around you, unless you have those glimmers of stimulation or somebody that you can kind of relate to, and you can go, okay, well, and this is the only reason I'm speaking or to anybody about this, and even posting a thing on Instagram about Scoliosis Awareness Month. It's not like me. It's taken me 3 years to do progress photographs for Precision Nutrition. I don't, and it's not that I don't celebrate successes. I do. I acknowledge successes, but I think you do need people around you to help you, and you need to ask the questions, and you need to ask for help. And it's not just as simple as accepting that you have this thing that's wrong with you, and this is your lot, because scoliosis is not a life, I was going to say it's not a life sentence. It's something that you have to live with, but strength and conditioning, it's the only thing that you can do. You can do a lot with it. I couldn't feel my core at all. I had very little feeling in my midriff, and I still don't. And even my spatial awareness around my arse is very limited. And when it was larger, it used to knock over a whole lot of stuff. But for me, chins was an ego thing. Doing a chin was an ego thing. And then suddenly, from doing chin-ups and stuff, and those muscles started to join together, I started, because you start to do a lot of imagining your muscles and imagining things that weren't there. When you can't feel things, you have to imagine it. So doing chins, eventually we got to my core. I couldn't do sit-ups and stuff like that. You couldn't do anything really core work. But going from the shoulders down worked. I got there eventually, and it made sense. It started to join the dots. So knowing your body and being aware of your accessory muscles, allows the larger muscles not to kick in and not to be the dominant ones. And they're like your scaffolding. So if you have metal in your spine, you can't rely on that metal, because generally metal breaks. So if you're just relying on that metal, and it's like people wearing back braces and stuff, they're just going to weaken all of the other muscles around you. So it's really important that kids from the get-go, and I know I sound like Zoolander for their school for kids that don't read so good, but I will at one point in my life be a philanthropist, and I will open something in Ireland for kids with scoliosis, because there's currently nothing. And there's so many things that kids can be doing, and you should be doing prehab. They shouldn't be going into surgery without prehab. They should know their body before they go into surgery, and they should know what needs to happen afterwards. It can't just be there's some metal now and off you go, because you just can't. There's a few support networks online at the moment for scoliosis, and people are trying to do really nice stuff. But then when you read into the Facebook stuff and the comments and things like that, people feel if your kid is entitled to a surgery, they should have the surgery, but that's not the only avenue. And Irish people like to be under a surgeon, and they like to be seen by a surgeon. They don't like it, but they think that's the best thing. but actually the spinal physios and stuff really have a huge role to play here. And I know that's what the point in the Spinal Institute is kind of trying to do, is trying to bring in the other stuff. So yes, you're still under a surgeon, but how about we try this? Because surgery only leads to more surgery. So essentially, if it's not going to work, there are other things, but it does take hard work.
Yeah, but I think what's remarkable about your story though is that I have no doubt you're going to build that place for people with scoliosis. I have no doubt about it after listening to you and watching you. I think you're a remarkable person. I think what would be interesting to know as well is that throughout this whole journey, then you're an entrepreneur as well. So you set up a number of businesses, but you've got a fantastically well known salon called Avery Lane. I would love to kind of understand why you got into it in the first place, but then secondly, then how you managed to maintain and build such a really good brand, which I've heard not only through FFS but from people just speaking anecdotally.
Thanks, that's very kind. Yeah, well, I mean, I knew the hairdressing was what I knew how to do, so that's what I had to do because that's what I know. I didn't have education behind me. I didn't have means behind me, so I was ticking all the boxes for life on social welfare, to be honest. I was sick mommy, hairdresser, Kulak. I needed a Nissan Micra and I was going to be set. And, I was a little bit more of a GTI kind of girl. So it was what I knew how to do. So I knew hairdressing would be the thing that you start with. It was a logical thing to do. And I knew if I was going to do it, I had to open a salon because I was going to have a physical lifespan as a hairdresser. So like Elaine was about 8 and I was thinking about doing it, and the recession was there, 2012. So there was a few units available in town and I was like, yeah, we'll go do that. And sure, why not? Like, when you've nothing to lose, it's very, why not? Like, whatever, the worst case scenario, you're back where you are now. And I initially opened it with my sister, and but we were kind of at slightly different life stages. Like, she was kind of only starting to get married and have kids and all that sort of stuff. So I ended up buying Palm out in year 3, just when the spinal stuff started, because I like a challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I never really fit in hairdressing circles as such. I grew up around really successful hairdressers. Pamela was in hairdressing in a very well-known brand for a long time, and she was like an international art director. And I think for me, I started to humanize people, and I had an ability to humanize, people. The way people say you should never meet your idols. I was around a lot of people that other people wanted to be, that they aspire to be. Except they'd be in my kitchen on a Sunday, and my mum would be feeding them like sausage sandwiches because they were hungover, And I couldn't understand going in as the younger sibling of someone that was very successful and deemed to be very successful in the industry. I couldn't understand why everybody was in all of these people,
Yeah.
And thinking that they were all great, and they were. Some of them were really, really good, but there'd be this illusion that they had it all, and then you realizing that they didn't have it all. They didn't have a pot to piss in. They had a Gucci bag, but they, that was about it.
Yeah.
And so it all became it was a facade. So I'm not great with that. That doesn't sit well with me, I wanted, you were told when you were training that it was all very creative and everybody was unique, and then you got on the floor and basically it was hard labor. It was, the most creative thing you did with your day was to be creative with your time. And that wasn't okay with me. I didn't want to do hairdressing like that because it was my work. If you're doing something, hairdressing, you do it with your hands, it's handmade. Anything else that's handmade has a little bit more respect. It takes a bit of time. It's a process. And I didn't like the idea that people came in and they were torn down before they were built back up. It sort of felt like people had to tear them down and be like, what you do with your hair? And it was just shocking. Like, they just made people feel like shit to make their mediocre work look okay. It's just be better, do better, treat the person, listen to them. And then So I mean, but not offending people. But for me, it wasn't enough. So anyway, Avery Lane was meant to be like, we wanted it to be like a venue. We wanted it. I learned while I was kind of freelancing when Lily was small and doing hair at home and stuff, that you know a lot of women hated going into the hairdressers. They actually really didn't like it because they were really self-conscious. These were women who were quite in successful jobs, in positions of power, and yet they went into the chair, they sat there, and they felt totally helpless because they've got some 22, 23-year-olds looking at them and judging them, and you're like, they're just waiting for their heads to explode because they're so vulnerable. They're sitting there and they're like, how can you possibly understand what I'm looking for? So
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to just turn that on its head and make it more about talking to people and communicating and making people feel comfortable. So I read a book, it was like Third Space, and we kind of were like, right, if we can be half of the clientele's third space where they feel like they can be themselves, and you break down those barriers and you make it more it should be a conversation. Like, for me, hairdressing is not a dictatorship. You shouldn't go in and be dictated to. It should be a democracy. You should be involved in the decision, and you could train a monkey to do the highlighting thing, but it's the deciding what works for you and what you want to be the best version of yourself. And again, it's that kind of holistic approach to people. If you're paying for a service, you should be getting service. You shouldn't be getting something and that is substandard, and that's why I kind of opened Avery Lane, was to try and give somewhere that people that were maybe not as boisterous or not as outgoing, somewhere to go to get their hair done and still come out feeling like they were listened to rather than.
How have you found it now through COVID?
I think the best thing to do is you park it, and if you set up a business already, you're in my head anyway. I'm just going back and I've set up a new business and it's a new business model and this is where we're going. And we're going to, like, that 3 months will sit there and 3 months will be paid off when it gets to be paid off, because, as much as landlords are demanding X, Y, and Z, you can't get blood from a stone. And that's a very factual based statement. So there's also not going to be a queue of people to take the units. So it has to be a conversation. They have every right to ask for their money. But they have to be reasonable. And if they want to boot me out, grand, because I've somewhere to go, so it's grand. But they're not going to do that. But it does have to be an open conversation, and they'll get it when they get it. And that's,
Yeah, I think there has to be that human understanding and human aspect. Like, nobody expected this or planned this. And I think what is interesting, though, is that your mindset, though, is that you're treating it as a new business opportunity, and that you're looking at it and going, right, fact of the matter is you've done it before in terms of starting businesses. And what I actually like, the correlation that you just spoke about with your clients when they come in, that you want to treat them like people and treat them and actually speak to them and talk to them and kind of have that conversation going. That's exactly what happened to you with FFS. That is exactly what happened, in that you were treated like a person. You weren't made feel any way bad or good or anything like that. It was just like, you're you, and this is us, and we want you part of it. And I think you've aligned yourself brilliantly. So I wish you the best, obviously, in the next phase. But I've no doubt with your determination and with your focus and just rationalization. Like, be just like, you're not asking for anything crazy. You're saying, listen, yeah, we're 100%. We'll pay you back, but let's be a bit real about this. What do you see being different now when you go back from your own perspective?
I think, like, I knew my moment would come. I didn't think that I would shine during a pandemic. I didn't think that would be it. But, who knew austerity intelligence was a thing? And it is. And the one thing I know how to do is get out of the shit. So how will it be different? It won't really, because human nature is going to kick in, and you can see it already. Like, I live in the middle of town and I've been downtown a lot of the days, and every day it gets a little bit more lenient, every day it gets a little bit more relaxed. So I believe they were leaving us till the 20th of July so that we could go back as business as usual with a mask and your sanitisation. But now I think it'll be back with a whole load of random screens that are surfaces that will have to be cleaned salons are not. They're fine, they're grand, they're hygienic as they can be, but the amount of traffic that they get, that's a whole lot of screens to be cleaned. Yeah, they're not, conscientiousness disappears after a while, so police it. But as far as I'm concerned, we were putting a lot of procedures in place before we left.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be very similar to before we left. Okay. We have some private areas in Elaine, and our capacity will be at probably about 30 to 40%, just through space, just through social distancing, and we will be running at a loss for the foreseeable future. But my goal with going into hairdressing and opening salons was the view to have our own premises and be paying down an asset. So I've done that, and we'll be moving into our own premises in the next kind of 2 years. So for me, it's a long-term thing. It's fine, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I'm not panicking, because I'll be able to, I'll be lowering our rent significantly, and I'll be a lot more kind of stable, and be able to formulate it a lot more than other people.
It's class, like the in summary, like of your story, it's kind of feels like you've gone through the shit with scoliosis, but that's helped kind of, you've had a really good foundation and a can-do attitude from your family to say, listen, we can do this, we can get through this, we can work at this. But then on top of that, then you had this kind of ambition to go and run your own business and be your own person and have your own kind of, have your lane. And you did that, and you've done it in a way which I think is admirable, because you've managed scoliosis all the way through, and then you found FFS, which for me is the kind of the glue. Health and fitness isn't just about lifting weights or nutrition. It's integrating with other people. It's learning about what works with your body. It's giving yourself a chance to recover and to understand and see little bits of change to go, right, okay, this can work,
I think for me as well, like it's reinforced, like there's hairdressing as a job, and then there's hairdressing as a career, and for me they're very different things. And I think the model for hairdressing, especially in Ireland, is very, very broken, and I think we have to really safeguard and ring fence the jobs and the careers that are for people that need to work with their hands, because their skill sets are going to be lost, like whether they're upholsterers or mechanics or things. Like, people like nice things, they like fancy things, but they need to be maintained. And I think from a sustainable point of view, we need to be looking at like crafts industries and things like that to make those legitimate careers, to make them to be actually something that people can aspire to, because in hairdressing a lot of the time it's a race to 30 grand a year. Like, that's it, there's a ceiling, there you are now. So for me, it's something I think is broken. It's something I'm hopefully have come up with a sort of a formula to kind of fix it, and it needs to be overhauled. So it's a good time, but I think hairdressing needs to be brought into wellness, and to do that, you need well hairdressers doing good things. You need people to understand themselves, to be solid in themselves, because you come up against an awful lot of stuff. Like, you are therapists, you do hear an awful lot of stuff. You need to be able to deflect that, and you also need to be able to feel like your best self, because if you're not valued, and you're not, if you don't have a path that's put in front of you and you can see where you can go, then you do just end up with like bitter hairdressers by the time they get to 30, because you wouldn't be putting in all the work and all the effort and not getting anything in return. So it's definitely, it comes under that umbrella of wellness. And I think there has to be something. I know I come from a place that like, I went into hairdressing, and yes, I was a single parent and I didn't have great schooling, and it gave me a foundation that I got to speak to all of these different people, all from all walks of life. And it, like, very much so, like, listened to the people speak when I was in Lily school, like listening to those women, like I like from a very early age, like, I noticed that all the people that I was kind of, my clients that I was friends with, they were all like barristers and solicitors, or doing stuff. They were all doers and architects and, designers. And so you get this really kind of broad sort of insight into, excuse the pun, but like, what makes people tick. Like, you get their psyche. They start to share, and And then you kind of start to break it down, going like, but they're not really that much different to me. Like, they're, similar smarts, and going, all right, okay, well, if they can, maybe I can. And you do, like, you establish people that you go, oh, okay, maybe I can do that too. So I think for a stepping stone, and maybe, okay, not for a very long career and, 40, 50-year career, but definitely to ring fence those things that give kids a hand up, that give them something to go into, to apply themselves in. And also, it is a craft, like it's kind of nearly got a thing, like a shameful thing in Ireland. It's like, they expect you to go into it because, you left school at 15 or anything like that. But there has to be those avenues for people to go down, whether they're big money makers or not, they still need to be there. It's the vocational side of stuff needs to be, worked on. I got off my soapbox.
Well, no, like stay on it, because like I think we need people like you telling that story and sharing that insight and kind of encouraging people who are starting off, or like I don't know, like there may be somebody listening to this who's in a similar situation and doesn't know what the world has in store for them. I think the biggest thing is that you followed a passion, you followed something that you loved, which was hairdressing, right? And regardless of having scoliosis, you still went after it. You didn't let anything get in your way, and you've now created something which is well known. And I think the learning is, and the thing for anybody young is to go after your dream, go after what makes what you love and what motivates you. And that was something I wanted to ask you, is like, if you were to gift somebody something, so if you were to offer somebody up a bit of advice, or have you gifted somebody something like a book or a song, whatever, what would that be and why?
It's understanding your sacrifice. I think for anybody that's starting off, and it's realizing that to be something, and I think especially in this age of kind of Instagram and instant gratification, and if my Facebook page says I am, then I must be. It, and I know it's sort of, people have said it about, like, empty vessels do make most noise. I think it's very easy to sort of go, oh, I want to be over there. And it's like, well, how do I get over there? It's like, you have to understand sacrifice. You have to be prepared to make sacrifice. If you've got a passion, keep it your passion, but you don't have to, your passion doesn't have to turn into your work. And I think it's wrong to think that it does. And that might be a little bit deep in regards to, not everybody has it all. Nobody has it all. What you think somebody has is underpinned by a sacrifice of something else. By giving up, like the yin and the yang, like it's understanding that, by giving up something, you get something else. You have to be prepared to give sacrifice to get success. There is going to be hardship, but it's the hardship that makes the good stuff better. Like the dark times, like the really dark times, are some of the best times, because you will have, some of the best belly laughs you've ever had in your life come from the darkest of darkness. And your sacrifice gives you perspective. The thing that you gave up, or the thing that you said, okay, do you know what, I'm not going to do that. And you made the right choice for you, even if it wasn't the popular choice. I couldn't really.
I think that's brilliant.
I was thinking about this for ages, and I didn't have a gift as such. Like, I wouldn't. But I think when I started to understand sacrifice, and I realized, I started to shift my perspective on choice, that I'm choosing to do this. And if I wasn't doing this, I'd just be doing something else. So, okay, we'll just keep doing this. So, like, I think getting to grips with that sort of stuff, and as you said, like, it's the critical thinking. It's exploring that, and the fact that we have access to YouTube, and you have access to lectures that, people are given to Cambridge and fancy universities, like, and you're getting to see them. To understand the philosophy of stuff can be a bit of a game changer. So yeah, understand sacrifice. There you are.
Can I ask you this though, and leading to that, and kind of an add-on, is there anybody that you look at or look up to now?
John, my partner. Like, we're 15 years in, and I've never seen somebody so diligent and work so hard. And be unbelievably, annoyingly, morally correct, and kind and supportive. And, you know, again, that's like the sacrifice. It's like people think, you know, you have shit because you have shit. It's not. It's 7 days a week. It's 365 days a year. It's finding solutions, and it's enjoying it while you do it. It's helping other people. You know, it's investing in people that have something about them that just need a bit of a leg up. And yeah, so I like what he does is phenomenal. His achievements, his you know, he's I can say I'm a single parent, but like he's been around since Lily was like a couple of months old, and he took that on, and he took me on, and you know, he could have been out there with a Svetlana, you know, but he wasn't. He was at home with his cripple and his child, you know. So I've never, like, my support network doesn't. I've been very, very, very blessed with my choices.
Amazing. Well, listen, I think on that note, I think it's a perfect way to bring the cast to a close. But genuinely, I'm so happy that you took the time to share the story. I think your story is remarkable, and from an outsider looking in, absolutely, I can always understand why people will see something and think that's it. But how we've communicated over the last while and getting to an idea of your personality, I thought it was brilliant. I think you're really straight, shoot from the hip, and really, really honest. And I think that is one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on. So thank you so much for being so straightforward, being so honest and so authentic. And before we go, if people wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, whether it's to find out a little bit of more information about scoliosis or indeed to become a client in Avery Lane, how would they do that, and what would be the best place to contact you on?
Yeah, they can get in touch. Probably email is probably the best, and it's just elaine@averylane.com. So if anyone does have any kind of questions regarding scoliosis, I'd be more than happy. Like, obviously I can't, you know, it's all opinion based and it's my own experiences, but like, I've had people have conversations with me that have sparked something, so I'll happily talk to anybody, as you can tell from the level of waffle that I've done today. Yeah, I'd happily talk to anybody that's looking for information. So
fantastic. All right, well, I'll leave all that information in the show notes as well. Elaine, I look forward to training alongside you when all this has been done and dusted. Yeah, it would be great. So thank you so much. Elaine, thank you for sharing this story. It's incredible to hear how you battled through all those tough times and found a way. The key thing for me is that you continued to have that can-do attitude, and you put in place an unbelievable support system to help you through it. And you've proved that with that system and with those people in place, you can achieve anything. So if this is your first time listening, please subscribe to the What Makes You Tick podcast and leave us a review and let us know what you thought of this specific episode. Tag and share us on Instagram as well. All you need to do is visit whatmakesyoutick.net, where you can leave a comment, you can send me an email, or you can visit me on Instagram at whatmakesyouTickPod, or again at Twitter at StevieBrads. Until next time, everybody, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and take care of everybody around you.